Hey everybody, welcome to episode one of Top 8 Podcast. I'm Nikki, and with me is my co-host Tyler.
Hey, I'm Tyler. How's it going?
We are a podcast focused on teamfight tactics, and in this episode, we wanted to take a little time to introduce ourselves, talk about the concept of the show as well. We'll be discussing the 10.2 patch notes and our understanding of the patch so far. We'll also be going over core mechanics of the game that apply to TFT in general. So, regardless of patch, you'll be improving in some small aspect of the game. But before we jump into that, we just wanted to give a little background on ourselves, how we got into TFT and why we're doing this podcast in the first place. My name is Nikki, obviously, and I got into TFT when the game first came out. It immediately absorbed me in, and I'm here now. I basically spend all my free time thinking about TFT and also playing it, and I've made a lot of progress from someone who hasn't played any competitive or auto chess or any game really. So it's going pretty well. So I'd say that there is a huge learning curve. In set one, I got to diamond, but this current set, I managed to get to challenger. So there's hope for everyone. And I'll leave it to Tyler to for him to talk a bit more about himself.
Yeah, I started playing a little bit of auto chess, the Dota mod. Played then a lot of that, but I never played it competitively because that was one of the challenges was you had to like join lobbies through Discord. It was kind of a pain. And then Underlords came out, and I played that until TFT came out. And I hit whatever max rank was in that big boss before Lord of Whitespire came out, for those of you who are familiar with it. And then jumped over to TFT. I hit GM in the first season, or Grandmaster, before World of Warcraft Classic came out, and then I got sucked into that a little bit, and so I didn't play any games. I ended the season with two accounts in like low diamond, diamond 3 and diamond 4, diamond 2, diamond 3, something like that. This season I've managed to hit GM again, but am just back hanging out in diamond for a little bit right now. Hopefully this patch will see a little bit of improvement there, though.
Yeah. So, and then going back to what the podcast is more about, we just wanted to give a more focused and analytical look at teamfight tactics and really just breaking down the game as the current set grows. We know that there are a ton of guides and ton of resources already out there, but we really wanted to sit down and look at specific real game situations. So, giving general tips on what you should be doing that applies over time because a lot of the skills that you learn in the game it carries over from set one to set two as well as patches, and we just wanted to talk a little bit more about that because when I was first learning the game it really felt like, oh, I needed to copy this guide and get these items, otherwise I'm doomed. But a lot of the top players, as you can see if you go to their streams or if you play the game more, it's a lot about flexibility and learning what items are good, what combines into what, and a lot of that just comes from experience and also picking up little skills that'll help improve your gameplay. So we'll be going over things like not waiting on items or playing strong early units and just basic econing in general for today. And because of that, we wanted to do a segment every week where we go over a video, so a VOD review. And that's just a way for us to sort of go over what's happening currently and sort of explain our thought process a bit more. So for this week, we'll just be looking over some general stuff, but in the future, we'll be looking at more specific things depending on the episode and the patch itself.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we hope to be able to offer that's like not currently going on is some very specific real game, real instances. So what we've done is we've taken a VOD. This week it's of one of my games, and we've cut it down to sort of some of the key points. That way, so we're not going to do a full review of a full game, but what I've tried to do with my incredible video editing skill is edit it down to um, some of the key points where we're like making items, where we're rolling down what we're looking for, if we're making any big econ decisions, and we want to be able to not just look at those and say that was good or that was bad, but look at them and say what were our options there, why is what happened there good, or why is possibly what happened there bad, to just really be more analytical than necessarily come across and just tell you do this or don't do that, but really like why does this happen or what are your options, sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I can go ahead and let's pull up this game then. Let's see here.
So we'll be disappearing for a bit now.
Yeah, we wanted you to be able to see the whole game, and I'll go ahead and start it. Um, you can kind of see like where we are here. We're at round 1-2, so just after the carousel, and we got a thresh with a spatula off the carousel. So that was our first item. This is the previous patch. Was that 9? Was it 10.1? Is that right?
Yeah, 10.1.
Yeah, where Sivir and Friends was still pretty good. So I picked up a spatula. I think that's a pretty solid opening in that patch.
Yeah, because depending on what you get, you can make a lot of different choices. Because in the last set, Blade Master was really good, and people like to get early spatula to get another bow, and those two items combined to get Blade Master. So that's why it was more contested then. It's still good now, of course.
Right. I think spatula's been pretty consistent in being a decent option as far as what it offers. There's usually something good. Force of Nature's an option, obviously, but there's often been like a good spatula item that you can make, whether it's Blade Master or Light, that sort of thing. Assassin in the first set was pretty good at one point.
Yeah.
Um,
And
oh, go ahead.
so looking at the VOD right now, I saw that you picked up the two Nasus's to get the pair because it's important to get pairs early on if you wanted to go back a little bit.
Yeah, let's back it up. Yeah, so I skipped over the end of this round. I just cut it out. I can tell you I don't get items here, and I don't get a significant amount of gold. So uh, we just have Nasus, the pair of Nasus and the pair of Vlad, and then we've got our Thresh hanging out with the spatula on it. And I opt to stay at 10 gold here to get the 1 gold in income.
Yeah, and that's often something that a lot of higher players do when they're trying to maximize the amount of gold that they get. If you get a really good early gold start and you're looking at the shop and you think, okay, I have enough pairs, I'm not really going to play some of these units. Maybe I can get to 10 gold so I can earn interest. And that immediately starts you off at a really good spot.
Yeah. All right. Let's so we're gonna skip ahead a little bit here. Um,
Oh.
yeah, that was exciting. Uh, Here we go. So now we're in round 2-3. You can see I'm on 2 Ocean, 2 Warden, so I've got the Thresh in there. I've got Nasus in there still. Still haven't paired my Vlads, and I'm also playing a Diana 1 right here. And we're about to go into Carousel. You can see I've got the spatula and the Brawler's Glove on my bench. So let's go ahead and watch this amazing round of combat. You can also see like I'm in 7th place before there, so and I think I end the round in 8th place. I'm at 81 health, so I've
Which
lost.
a lot of people may be worried if they're at this health, but I would say that definitely your game is not over if you're at 80 health around Carousel. You have plenty of time. A lot of the early damage lets you streak. So as you can see, there was a 3 loss streak from your last round. You can tell
Yeah, I
from
can back up
just
just
a
a
bit
second.
before. And that gives you more gold to play with because you're accumulating more over time. And it's really great just because there are some people who even open fort. And if you don't know what that means, it basically is they'll sell their entire bench. They'll have maybe 1 or 2 units on the board and just call it a day. And that way they get a lot of gold. So by the time it's around Krugs, they have a higher chance of hitting the high cost units that they want.
Yeah, the idea there is to make sure that they're always at that 10 gold interval at the very least. So they're if whatever the maximum amount of 10 gold interval they can have, 20 gold, 30 gold, whatever it is, to make sure that they're gaining that maximum income. And I just wanted to look here real quick. The only 2 items I have are spatula and brawler's gloves, as we said, and those make the Berserker
The-
Spatula.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so what I've done here is I'm at 24 gold, but I'm holding this Jax and an Ornn. I obviously haven't seen a lot of Berserkers between, 2-1 and now, but I'm holding those in the event that going into this carousel or coming out of this carousel rather, like Berserker Spatula looks like a good item. I could possibly, you know, start to play into Berserkers that way. But the way I tend to break up my bench is usually what I have on the left side of my bench is what's like up for sale, and what I have on the right side of my bench is like the things that I'm actually trying to build with and hang on to. So there's a Vlad pair with the Vlad on the board, a Diana pair with Diana on a board, and these two Leonas make a pair, obviously. So just wanted to point that out going into this carousel, as we are going to sell after the carousel, and I think we wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So if you don't know already, you can sell when you are in the carousel round. It's not intended, but one of the tricks is that if you remember in this game, he has 24 gold, and you should always remember how much gold you have when you're going into carousel because you don't have to necessarily hit that 30 interval or that 20 interval because you might be able to get a unit that will push you up to the next interval. So if you want to play the clip, you can kind of see that.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask real quick, like with those two items, is there something
Mhm.
specific you would be looking for in carousel here, or if you sell the Jax and you sell the Ornn, that would put you at 27 gold. Jax is 2 gold, Ornn is 1 gold. Would you
Mhm.
just be looking for a 3 cost to hit 30 gold that way? Like, what would your thought be?
Yeah, I would personally definitely try to get a three cost, maybe an item that is a component for something in the future that'd be useful. So, for example, if I'm looking at here in this game, there's 3 gold for a tier, rod, and sparring glove. I wouldn't take the chain vest just because it's not a super offensive item, and depending on what you want to do, you can leave your options open. You can wait till Krugs to make an item, or you can make one even now. And a lot of the items like Jeweled Gauntlet, which is the glove plus rod, is really good on someone like Kindred, for example. And that would just be something that I would try to do, or I would try to find a way to maybe pick up an item that I want, like spatula, for example, and then I can sell another one of my units that maybe I think, okay, I'm not even going to play. Maybe it's just taking up bench space, that kind of thing.
All right, so let's see what I do. I mean, we know what I do, but
Yeah,
I end up
so
taking the
you're deciding.
spatula. Yeah, and I take a second to decide. That's why I'm like walking next to it. I'm not 100% sure that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to, we'll see in a second. That's a 2 cost unit, so I need to sell 4 gold in units. So I actually sell this Leona pair. Um,
Yeah, and the trick to doing this strat or this motion, I guess, is if you tab to your map when you're still on carousel, as carousel is ending, you use your keyboard to press E on the where the unit is going to land. So it's always going to be the first spot on your board that's free, and then you press that and you can make income. It definitely goes in because that's what a lot of people do, and that's just a really easy way that a lot of people get to the next interval of gold. And while these intervals seem like, oh, maybe it's not super important, but it really is. A lot of that gold really adds up quickly. So definitely always keep that in mind when you're playing the game.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about RNG, which is the term that's just sort of used to indicate that things are random. It comes from
Mhm.
random number generator, and so they talk about how random the game is, which is true. There's a very random component to the game, and so you're trying to do small things like that to help mitigate how much these random elements affect you. Is kind of the
Exactly.
idea. Like the more you can
Because you can
mitigate,
control. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. All right. So let's get back to this. I pick up. I mean, I get 3 Talias, so I just make a Talia,
Yeah.
and then I make Force of Nature and put her in play. And then we skip ahead to Krugs here at 2-7. Not a lot has changed with my board state. I've got. Uh, I guess it looks like I made an Ornn 2 and put him into play, and I've just leveled up to
Mhm.
6 here. I know I'm going to sell that cog and look to hit 50 gold here. You'll see I position all my units on the right side for Krugs, with the exception of Diana. Diana's an assassin, so she's going to jump. I just want to focus down one Krug since the other two Krugs will heal when the first one dies.
Exactly.
So you don't want to
Yeah.
split your damage there. This is like realistically almost the only round you can die to for PvE, so
I've
you
died a
might as
couple of
well.
times to this, yeah.
Yeah. I hit 3 gold here, and I get a needlessly large rod and a giant spell. Um, then I grab that Nautilus so I can play Ocean Wardens, which is just a generally strong, like early, mid, and even into late game, they can be pretty good combination.
Yeah.
And then I go ahead and I make items. I got the belt and the rod off of Krugs there, which I combine on Nasus to make um, Morellonomicon,
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, which is a pretty good item on Nasus. He'll hold it for now, and I'll be able to swap it to him later. And then I know I'm going to sell, and I'm free to do that because I know I'm going to sell Nasus at some point. I'm not going to play the whole game with Nasus. Same as I just put this glove, the Brawler's Glove, on Diana because I know at some point I'm going to sell Diana, and I might as well have that component out there doing something useful in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the game itself is understanding how to go from these one costs into transitioning into your late game or mid game carries. And Nasus is a great user of Morello's Morellonomicon just because when he ults, the surrounding area around him, so anyone around him gets inflicted by the damage of the Morellos. And that's why if you were playing earlier in the set, Zyra was really good, and it's interesting because you can use Zyra or Nasus, and you can eventually swap those items to Brand or Nami, which are sort of like game carries.
Yeah, in all of those cases, what you're looking to do with Morellonomicon is find a damage source that does damage in an area. So Nasus does damage to the area directly around him when he uses his ability or his ultimate. And a lot of the summoners, Zyra, in particular, she spreads damage around with the plants because you just want to get that healing debuff and the damage over time on as many targets as possible.
Mhm.
And that remains true in the late game as well, right? Because you're swapping it to things like Brand or Nami, who are going to hit a big piece of the enemy team.
Yeah, and just a lot of the game itself is sort of thinking about how the items play into the abilities of the units. So, for example, Amumu later on, his ult is just a giant explosion. When he explodes, that Morello value is covered in that entire space and whoever's in it. And that applies to Nami's wave, Malphite's, I don't know what it is, but when he runs and charges at everyone, that also applies Morello's. So a lot of little things like that. So you can think about the interactions of the items and how good they are. So if you put it on, like, for example, Vlad, he can only focus on one enemy, so Morello's on him isn't super good. But if you put it on Syndra, while her ult is random, it does spread a larger pool of areas, so she can be also a good carry before you find Brand.
Right. All right. Let's see what's going on from here. We make the jump to 3-3, so we're right before the 3-4 carousel. I'm scouting around. And I'm scouting around in part. If we look at my team, I'm on 4 Warden, 2 Ocean, but I've also picked up this Soraka pair, and
Mhm.
I was scouting there. I mean, you should scout generally pretty often, anyways. But I know I just picked up that Soraka pair, and I was scouting in particular to see how useful Mystic would be to me right now, and whether or not I really like wanted to try to swap in this Soraka because pretty normal level timing. Like I know I leveled to uh, level 6 at 3-2, and you can see like I still have all my gold. I'm at 53 gold, so I haven't rolled at all here yet. And I'm going to level at 3-5 the round after the carousel to 7, and then I'm probably going to roll a little bit there to look for units. I know, so I'm looking to see like, okay, when I do this in just like one more round, basically, should I be looking to like try to fit in Mystic here and make some sort of swap to that in the mid game, and will I get good value? And we can see I'm like tied for sixth, seventh place right now at 67 health. So coming up a little bit in the rankings in terms of health for the lobby, but still not in a particularly, neither I would say a particularly strong nor particularly worrisome place at 67 health.
Hmm.
All right, let's check out a quick round of combat here as we go into carousel.
So you're definitely winning.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
we can see like I'm on a 1-loss streak and I won. You can see in the top I won round 3-1. So not I'm able to conserve a little bit more health, I think, through some of
yeah.
the item choices that I've made in particular here, like that
And if
Morello's
you
is a big
pause
help.
here for a second,
Yeah.
one trick that I hopefully, if you don't know already, is you are the same health as the other guy, Hideo Kojima,
Yeah.
and you can tell if you get that first pick or the other guy does, depending on who you are across from on the carousel.
Right.
So obviously you aren't first pick because you're across from the guy who is second pick. So that is completely just random by the game, and that's just a trick if you haven't already heard of it.
Yep. All right. Let's see. So also, just as a reminder here, I only have one open item component, one unused item component. It's that Brawler's Glove. So I think we're both of them.
Sparring glove.
Is that what it's called? Sparring Glove?
I think it's sparring glove.
Well, it's a glove. I've been calling it Brawler's Glove the whole time. Um, uh, so it, I think we're both kind of the mindset that if you have open item components coming into carousel, it's a good idea to try to complete an item using one of your open item components, right?
Yeah.
So ideally here, I'd be looking to make something using that sparring glove. Is there anything in particular with the comp that I have now that you would be looking
Hmm.
to make with that sparring glove?
So I would personally try to pick up maybe another rod just because it looks to me that you're going ocean, and with that Morello's, you're doing some sort of magic damage. So definitely you are thinking, like as you're playing the game, you're thinking ahead to what your final comp may be. And because of that, I would say that it would be something more magic based. So if you combine that sparring glove with a rod, it's a jeweled gauntlet, and that could be good for brand later. Or you could consider picking up another glove itself because that makes thieves gloves and that gives you um, items at your current state. Obviously, it's not here, but that's just something to consider. Or you can also just pick up another component that you might be able to use later because it doesn't seem like you have too many items. It depends what wolves will drop you. So you can also just be greedy, but I would pick up the rod. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going into this, I was probably looking for a rod. The other item that I would really consider here would be tier, not to
Hmm.
combine with sparring glove. That would make Hand of Justice, but instead, just because I know, like you said, that I have the Morellonomicon already, so I've got Ocean, so I'm already like generating some mana. So I'm probably looking at going some sort of a ability or spell damage comp, um, with like a brand carry or like Nami late game carry or something like that, where
Hmm.
having more ability power or spell damage rather would be helpful. So let's see what ends up happening here. Okay, so the tier and the rod are both gone, and at this point, I know I just kind of I pick a good unit. Kha'Zix is a good unit, and then I opt to. I mean, he's also 4 gold, so I take the highest gold cost unit I can there as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of a
Because sometimes
compromise.
you don't want to take a one cost off of the carousel, even if it's not your ideal item, because from there wasn't anything that you really would have wanted. So maybe just take the gold.
Right. And then I think we stay on this a little bit because I roll down here. I find the Soraka's. Um, I hit, Thresh 2 and Vlad 2, so I put them both in play. And then I get this pair of Master Yi, which, given that I just put Soraka in, is kind of nice because that'll get me to Mystic there.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that you didn't completely roll down all of your gold to 10, sorry, to 0, just because when you definitely you should roll down at 7 to sort of hit the combination of units that you're going to need, but you don't want to completely destroy your economy by doing that. So when you're at 0 gold, it's harder for you to get that econ value, that increase, that income. So definitely staying till 10 is a pretty safe bet. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I was hovering that Jana there. Had I not won the round, I would have sold her to get to over 10 gold so I could at least get some amount of income. And now
Mm-hmm.
here, I'm actually going to make I'm going to make another play to like get my econ back up because I've got the Master Yi here. And I opt to just play both of them and sell this Vlad as well as the Kazakhs, and I don't feel like I'm going to play the Zyra pair this late, so I sell those as well, which get me
Yeah.
back up to 30 gold. Um, just
Yeah. And really, oh, no, sorry, go
well, I was
ahead.
just gonna say, like, if you watched while I rolled down earlier, I picked up a bunch of units that I wasn't even necessarily going to play, and those just help to thin out the pool overall, so that if they're on your bench, you can't see them in your shop. So when you're looking at like 4 cost units or 5 cost units in particular, picking those up on the way down can be good because they come from a smaller pool of units. I think there's 16 of each 4 cost unit, 10 of each 5 cost unit, um, and so one of the things you'll see is that a lot of players will do this in higher MMRs or higher ELOs or higher ranked lobbies, however you want to say that, and it'll look like they go to a really low gold, but then they'll end up selling a bunch of stuff back, ideally before income happens. So like before the round happens, or ends anyways. That way you get the maximum amount of income as the result of it. Just in my case, I wasn't able to put that Master Yi in play until next round because I rolled him too late. So you still saw me sell back up to a good amount of gold. So you can see now here we're at 4-3. I've jumped up to second place in terms of total health. And I'm at 53 gold again. I was able to recover a lot of gold between here and the last carousel. We skipped over wolves. I got literally a bow and a Negatron cloak off of wolves, I think was about it. Um, so I haven't really made any items. I put a bow on Master Yi just to try to conserve as much health as possible because I think in this game I don't feel particularly strong. Like there's nothing really strong going on here. I'm on 4 Warden. I've got 3 Light right now, which isn't really doing a whole lot for me. 2 Ocean and 2 Mystic. So I'm just trying to save as much HP in every round as possible, hoping to kind of come in to a top 4. This like doesn't look like a game I'm going to win to me, but it does look like a game that if I play correctly, I'll get into the top 4 here.
Yeah, and just noting that a lot of the times you just want to be playing for a top 4. You're not going to get perfect items or perfect units every time as you're rolling down. A lot of times people will also pick up those units when they're rolling down, like good units like Yorick or uh, like forecast units, Brand, Annie, those types of units, just because it keeps your options open. And if you hit it, it's probably better to play those units than to hard force something, because a lot of the times when you are hard forcing, it does make it a lot more difficult. And that just comes with a lot of experience playing the game, of course, but just knowing where you can sort of sort of make ends meet if you aren't hitting the units that you're wanting, because sometimes that's just what happens.
Yeah, and I kind of forgot here. I am at 53 gold. We're at 4-3. This is a timing where you can level. You can see I'm 22 of 50, so I'm 28 gold to level. And I take a long time to make this decision, but ultimately, in the name of trying to save some HP, I decide to level here. Um, and then I roll down just the once and hit that Annie because I don't have enough time to roll down any more than that right now. Um,
Yeah, and a lot of the times people will opt to go to a fast 8, is that's sorry, that's what they call it, because if you're looking at this current board right now, there aren't you haven't hit a brand, you haven't hit anything really super big. And if you're just rolling down at 7, there's really no point basically. When you're rolling at 7, your chances of hitting those 5 costs are a lot lower than if you're at 8. And your percentage of hitting 4 costs as well goes up when you are at level 8. And looking at that board, because you don't have any pairs that you need to finish off, it's probably just best to rush 8, hopefully find maybe a singed or a brand 2, that kind of thing. And that's just an important game sense, sort of, because when you're rolling down at 7, you don't want to be doing it blindly. You want to be rolling for a reason. So a lot of the decision makings uh, strats that you're doing in the game are ways that you can help improve your gameplay.
Right. And here I've got the two, let's see, so I've got two Negatron cloaks, a bow, and a brawler, no, a sparring glove rather. Is there anything that you would be trying to make here, given what we've seen out of my comp um, in particular?
Because I see that you already have the Yi, I would try to opt to go for that bow. And obviously, it's been taken just because rapid fire cannon is really good on Master Yi.
Right.
And then you opted to take the sword,
I
right?
took the sword, yeah.
Yeah, and that's also really good because you have the sparring glove, and that just makes it an IE, and IE on him is great as well.
Yeah. Obviously, you don't normally want to throw items on level 1 Master Yi. I'm just sort of assuming that I'm gonna hit the last Master Yi here, given how much time I have left in the game still. Um, so
Yeah, and you're just rolling down because you already have hit 8, and you're looking for some sort of carry, some sort of damage dealer that isn't just a level 1E. You could
right,
hit that Yorick upgrade, so there's a lot of options.
yeah, and so we went ahead and skipped ahead to 4-7 here. We're at Raptors. I have my board's largely the same still. I've got level 2 Master Yi now, so I did hit that Master Yi. Um, maybe this might have been an incorrect decision, but I put in Nami for 4 Ocean over Soraka. Um, so I keep Mystic that way. I like Nami CC a lot, but Soraka was 2-star, and Soraka was kind of doing a lot, especially being on that Ocean Hex and getting a somewhat early silence. So just a note. And then I've paired my Annie. I've paired my. I'm still on the York pair, and I'm on a Kiana pair as well here with 10 gold. So I've been like rolling a little bit the last couple of rounds, just trying to finish up these pairs. Like I don't feel like this is a game um, where I do particularly well if I don't hit some of these pairs pretty soon. I just probably start to lose a lot of HP, I think.
Yeah, and the decision to sell the Soraka for the 4 Ocean, I think is fine just because of the fact that 4 Ocean buff is really noticeable from the 2 Ocean buff. And Soraka did help you pretty. I'm sure she helped you win some fights in the mid game. While you did lose 3 gold, it might just have been a good investment in general, just because you're saving so much health over time, and everyone else is at 14 health. You know.
Right. So, and again, here, so we're at Raptors. I'm in first place in terms of health. I've got 56 health. The rest of the lobby is a little bit closer to 30 health with a couple of stragglers down there at like 20, 16, 14 health. So let's see what I get off Raptors here and what I do with the items. Okay, so I get a full item. I get a full gun blade, not an item I was super looking for. And then I get a tier and another sparring glove. And then
Yeah, so immediately hit the Singed, and
yeah,
Singed is really great with the Morellos just because he spreads it really well.
yeah,
And if you notice here that you also made that last Whisper, it's a relatively new item from the item changes from last patch, but IE plus the last Whisper is a really good combination because of the crit on the IE and then the armor reduction because of the last Whisper.
right. And then the last set of decisions I make here is probably a lot more debatable. Um, I I guess my options there would realistically have been I could have put a Negatron cloak with the bow on Master Yi and made Runins, he would have hit a second target that way. And then I could have made Hand of Justice on him as well with a tier and
Mhm.
the sparring glove. Uh, and I still would have had a leftover Negatron, which I ended up putting on Nami. I just didn't want to see her get burst down by a spell immediately and not get her ultimate off. So it's like a little bit helpful. Might as well do something though. So we're at 5-1. The reason I made all my items and even made some suboptimal items here is because we're at 5-1. We're not going to see any more item components in all likelihood now. Carousels are going to have full items, and creep rounds are going to have full items for the most part. So there is a chance, I think, at the 6-4 carousel, if the game goes that long, to see item components, but that usually also has at least some full items on it as well.
Yeah, and you don't want to wait that long to just have a component sitting on your bench.
Right.
And
Um,
sometimes, oh, sorry.
oh, go right ahead.
And the reason to put the cloak, I would say, not maybe on Singe, for example, is because if we are going into that stage five carousel, and if you put that cloak on perhaps like Singe, for example, then you can't. If you see a death cap on that carousel, you can't switch the death cap onto Singe because his slot is already there. So a lot of people sometimes will try to save that last slot in hopes that they'll get a better item from that last carousel.
Exactly. I think the biggest debatable decision here was I could have made Dragon Claw on
Hmm.
Master Yi, which would have been both of the Negatron cloaks combined, and he would have gotten the 50% magic damage reduction on him. And then I could have put a tier on Nami, and she would have gotten an earlier alt. That might have been a better decision. What do you think?
So for this, I would typically try to scout the lobby, see what kind of damage is going on. If I'm seeing that the lobby has a lot of Berserker players, then I would not make that D-Claw, Dragon's Claw, just because it's not going to do anything versus the Hush. While the Hush did get a nerf, it's still pretty good in terms of silencing any enemies. So, and Master Yi goes pretty fast, so.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I'll say we're missing. I didn't leave in time where I was scouting the lobby. We're trying to make this not take for absolutely forever. But I know that the lobby. I know one of my considerations in this game was trying to go for Mystic because I feel like the last couple of players in this lobby, at least, or the highest couple of health players right now, I think are on some more spell damage, magic damage, heavy composition. So it may have been better to get the earlier Nami alt and have the Dragon Claw and Master Yi. But
Mhm.
let's go ahead here. I think we skip ahead in just a second. Yeah, so we're at 5-3. I'm at 41 health. I'm still at first place in the lobby. There are 3 players eliminated and a couple of players on low health, one on 15 and one on 10. My comp is essentially the same. I've hit 2-star Annie, and we're about to go into Carousel, so no real big changes otherwise.
Yeah, and you've put the Annie in the Ocean Hex just so that she has a faster time of casting the bear out. So,
Yeah,
so we're looking, you're slaughtering this guy's team.
yeah. Unfortunately, it was a cloney
The
guy, but
bot.
yeah, it was the
Yeah.
bot. So here, all full items. Is there an item you see here, Nikki, that you would particularly want for this comp?
So there are a couple of good items. I'll probably go down the list of items that I wouldn't take. For example, I wouldn't take the Giant Slayer just because there's no one on my team that could really use it, and I don't need another Morellonomicon. Or I know, Iceborne isn't that great on this set either. Just thinking about what sort of items are good for your team, even if you necessarily um, you want to pick something that'll be useful to you, basically. And you can also break down the items by the components that they're made by. So you can also think, okay, maybe I can take that redemption because it has a tier on it and a belt, and I could put it on one of my frontliners because that'll give them some mana to start off the fight, and they also get a little bit of health. So something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think realistically, there, all of the items that I could have used that weren't this Blade Master spatula were taken. I think I
Yeah.
probably would have rather had the jeweled gauntlet for spell crit on Singed as a third item there. But I end up with this Blade Master spatula. Of the remaining items, it lets me get, Master Yi's got 3 items. He's level 2, and now he has Blade Master 2. And that was kind of all I can do. So we skip ahead to 5-7. We're at Dragon. I get a death cap, and really the only thing that's happened is I'm at 50 gold. I've been saving up my gold because the only thing I can realistically hit here that matters is Yorick 2, and I don't feel like rolling a bunch of gold for Yorick 2 in this position is necessarily as good as leveling when I felt like I was in a position to level through this lobby. You can see I've lost the last 2 rounds as well, so I'm at 15 health. The rest of the lobby is 12, 11, 10 health, so I'm still in first place. There's still 4 players. Yeah.
So you get a great item for Singed, and
yeah,
I know earlier you said the spell crit for Jeweled Gauntlet on Singed. I don't know. I heard that it's not super great, but I'm not sure just because I don't know the interaction for that and Morello's, but I know it is super good paired with IE, so something to think about.
Right. I would have just taken it in that case because it's just more damage for Singe
Yeah.
immediately. Um, so yeah, so here I'm on 60 gold. We've got the death cap coming back, and I go ahead and level, and I roll down, and I'm just looking for anything playable. I know I was thinking about selling Malphite to go down to 2 wardens, and getting from there trying to put in 2 mystics, but I didn't really find anything like that. I found instead 3 Amumus. So I just end up playing Amumu 2. It puts me on 4 wardens. Amumu 2 is a strong unit. I don't think there's a whole lot more to say about that.
Yeah, and if you're looking at this fight, typically when you are closer to the last, like top 3, top 4, uh, a lot of the game is just positioning and sort of understanding where units will go. So typically around this time you would be scouting, seeing if there are any Zephyrs that could Zephyr your carry, that kind of thing. And for this game itself, I would have even considered selling that Singed, putting the items on a Mumu,
Yeah,
and
that could
then
have been an option there for
yeah,
sure.
throwing in the brand that was in the shop. But that's just a way of thinking about, oh, okay, maybe like Singed isn't cutting it anymore. I can't get level 2. Maybe the Amumu going off with those items is a lot better.
Yeah.
Just those types of things. But yeah,
Yeah, my hopes and dreams there were to hit Singe 2, obviously. But moving the items to Amumu 2 is definitely something that in retrospect I considered. And I'm sure I thought about it while it was going on there. It was just I didn't really hit that Amumu 2 until the last second either. So
yeah. And a lot of that is just high APM, knowing how to roll down really
exactly.
fast, picking up things that you need, that kind of thing.
Cool. And then you can see here, I go out in 3rd place. I kind of get a little bit lucky, and this guy goes out before me. But yeah, that's just kind of how that game went.
Yeah. So after that VOD, we sort of just want to talk about some main topics as we go into talking more about TFT in general. We know we covered a lot of things in the review itself, but we wanted to focus on some specific topics just for a bit before we move on to our next segment. So one of the biggest things that we really stressed was flexibility in gameplay, and you can see that in that game, you were going for Ocean, but you didn't really find any brands. So as soon as you saw that Singed in your shop, you weren't going to wait for the brand. You thought, okay, I'm just going to pick up that Singed. So playing sort of flexible in that sense, and also understanding that the comps where you see the comp guides, while they say you need this item and this thing, uh, typically you don't need to get perfect items because that's not going to happen every game. And
Right.
um, a lot of that is just understanding what items are good on which units and which early items will help you basically have an easier time without losing too much health as you're going from early to mid to late game.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote in the show notes here, playing good items on good units that make good use of those items. And to the best of my ability, that's sort of what I did that game. Like, I wouldn't even necessarily say I was playing towards Oceans. I
Mhm.
played Oceans because I got Ocean units, and I think Ocean units are good for the most part. Or at least I think we were on an ocean map. I think Kiana's a good unit. I think Navi's a
Yeah.
good unit. Nautilus is a very good unit, and Thresh is okay, and he rounds out sort of that for ocean there. And then I just kind of played the best of whatever else I actually ran across. And I think that's what we want to talk about, as opposed to like if you can hit one of these comps that are in a guide and you end up with the items for them, that's like when you maybe get to win a lobby, right? But if you
Yeah,
try to
when
do
you
that,
get that first.
right, but when you try to do that every game and you run into a game like the one that I just had where you don't necessarily see all of the pieces that you would want to see for a specific comp, or you don't have items that necessarily add up to the items that are supposedly optimal for a comp, what do you do to get into that top four so that you're still gaining LP, not losing LP, continuing to climb, so you can accomplish your goals or whatever? And that's kind of what we want to break down, not only in this topic but on the podcast in general. Is, you know, how do you play the game when it's difficult, basically, as opposed to when you're high rolling and you're just getting all of the stuff you need in your shops, you know?
Exactly. And knowing sort of where your options are if you don't end up hitting those units. So, for example, in the last the last patch, Berserkers. If you don't hit that Olaf, what do? You need six Berserkers. So, I've seen other players maybe transition into four Desert and then Assassins, that kind of thing.
Sure. And so then what do you think are some like good versatile items that you can play generally on good units that you can like look to make in the early game?
Yeah, so I typically try to go for needlessly large rod on the first carousel, and just because I think that it combines into a lot of good items. So, for example, you made that Morello's really early on. You can throw Morello's on Syndra, on Nico, on Zyra. They all are really good Morello targets, and because the health is so low in the early game, it's really good for spreading that burn. And you can also make Seraphs or Shojins just because those will help you get the abilities off of your units faster. Just sort of not waiting for the items to come to you. Sometimes you're definitely not going to get perfect items every game. So you need some early game buff or help to help you not just tank a lot of health early on.
Right. And we're not suggesting that you commit to um I guess for lack of a better term, inferior items early. Like nobody's saying if you get, uh, I don't know, if you get early on a cloak and a chain vest, we're not saying like instantly make sword breaker. Maybe if you really like playing lights and you want to play Lucian, I think he's the only unit I can think of where you're like actively trying to play sword breaker. Maybe then, but you know, if you get these components and you can make these items, they're going to be good early and they're going to remain pretty strong late game. And that's, you know, going to be useful. And you mentioned some good units that you can play these items on. I'm trying to think if there are any others. There's Locket. I think Infinity Edge is a pretty good early item as well.
Mhm.
Um, it's got a lot of versatility. As you mentioned earlier, you can play it with Jeweled Gauntlet, which lets you play it on like more of a spell damage caster setup. So you don't necessarily. I think the first thing a lot of people think when they see Infinity Edge is like this goes on an auto attacker, right? It's got a
Yeah,
sword in it, and so sword gives you more auto attack damage. But it does have that interaction with Jeweled Gauntlet. Jeweled Gauntlet makes your
spells crit.
spells crit, right, and Infinity Edge increases your crit damage when you have a critical strike. So there is that interaction, so that you can play that there. And I think because of that interaction, I also think Jeweled Gauntlet can be an okay early item. I don't
Hmm.
think it's
Hmm.
necessarily as strong as like Locket or Morello's, or as versatile as Locket or Morello's. But I think if you've got it early, and you have some concept of composition you like that it can play well on, they can definitely be something you can make early.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, if right off of the second stage two carousel, you get a sparring glove and you have a rod on your bench, are you going to wait all the way until the next carousel if you don't hit it after wolves, or are you just going to make that jeweled gauntlet? I
Right.
would sometimes just make that jeweled gauntlet because I don't want to take so much damage from 3-1 to the stage 3 carousel till I hopefully get a belt, you know?
Yeah, and that's I think I mean, I guess one of the reasons we're even making this podcast is because the answer to most things, when you really look at it, if you're really knowledgeable in teamfight tactics, is it depends, right?
Yeah.
There aren't like a lot of cookie cutter answers for a lot of situations, which is why we want to talk about general situations, but then also look at these specific situations like we just did. But kind of like what you were talking about, if you already had some a strong item on board, you might wait to make that jeweled gauntlet. Maybe it doesn't exactly fall in line with what you're thinking about playing. Um, so like if you already had a locket made or something, you might not have to rush that jeweled gauntlet. And I know we talked about the idea, you specifically mentioned it, about making an item after Krugs. Like if you don't already
Hmm.
have a strong item on board, and you get to Krugs, it can very often be a good idea, like you were saying, to make an item at Krugs to try to help save health through the game, right?
Yeah, just because everyone else has already probably made an item, if you're greeting to hopefully get your perfect item off of a carousel or creeps, you're just going to take too much damage. And oftentimes that's where you're going to play it really dangerously because maybe you aren't even first pick off of the carousel, and that just leaves you in a bad spot.
Right, exactly. Um, and then so with some of these good versatile items, like what are good early units in your opinion to play these on?
So I always try to think about the game in terms of a front line and a back line. So in your last game, as you could see, you had a lot of wardens. So the wardens were definitely your front line. And the Nasus is a really great unit just because he can use some of the items early on, for example, the Morellos, and you can eventually take that out and put it on Brand. And so Brand would be your back line, and then your wardens would be your front line. And that sort of thing is the way that you would transition throughout the game. So other good units are like Zyra or Diana, and those units give you that Inferno buff. So maybe if you get an early Varus too, you can do a lot of burn damage from the Inferno buff.
Yeah, and just thinking about like some of the units that I think are good early, I think specifically a lot about some of the one cost units because
Hmm.
you can two star them. They cost you 3 gold, and then when you resell them, you get 3 gold back. So it's at a very low cost, if any cost to you.
You don't lose any money from making them. So definitely try to pick up those pairs if you're seeing them.
Right. And I think it's maybe a little bit inaccurate to say you don't lose any money, only because you could potentially lose by having them 2-starred rather than like leaving them at the 1-star version. You could lose out on making a 10 gold interval, so you could lose income gold potentially. But
Right. And a lot of that is just sort of understanding what comps you want to be going. So if you have maybe a Syndra and a Vlad and you have a Talia, that's three mages. Are you going to be playing a random Vayne, or would
right.
you rather sell it, to make money?
Right. But I mean, in the early game, you might just play the random vein. Like if you can get it on the board, if you can have space for 4 units, even if you have those three, if you could 2-star that vein, maybe that saves you on health. It depends on you. That's where you have to. That's where it depends. You have to scout your lobby. Like, does this win me around? Are you on a win streak? Stuff like that, which
Yeah.
is like
Or
too
is it
complicated to really get into.
if I sell it, I can get to 10 gold, like that
Right.
kind of thing.
Exactly. And you have to evaluate which is more advantageous at the time. But yeah, sometimes just making those, even losing that income gold to make a 2-star unit is
Hmm.
going to be advantageous over time, right? You're going to win more rounds, get more gold from winning rounds, and save more HP potentially doing it.
Yeah.
And when I think of those units that I like you mentioned, Zyra, Diana, Nasus. I also like Leona. I think she's really strong early. And then I think Woodlands is just a strong early synergy. So being able to play Woodlands, even if you're not able to 2-star the units necessarily, if you get like especially early, if you get two of the druids, that druid regeneration can really win some rounds
Yeah.
early on. Predators are pretty okay early if you're seeing a couple of them. If you put in three predators, you get the predator synergy. You can win some rounds you might not win otherwise that way. And then the last thing I was going to say is just a lot of the three cost units are strong units, and they're strong even at 1 star. Like an early Kiana or an early Kindred can really, I feel like, make a good amount of difference. You know, if you hit them at 2-1 or 2-2 in these early rounds where everybody's only playing 3 units, I think they have a lot of value there too. So
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah. And
necessarily.
it,
Oh, I was just
oh
gonna
no,
say you're
sorry.
not necessarily going to 2 star them at that point, so it's a little bit weird to think of like trying to play that unit, but those are just good units if you see them in your shop that can help save you some HP, maybe make you a little bit of gold early, but they are expensive. So you, like we talked about, you have that trade-off of maybe you're playing like 6 gold in 2 3 cost 1 star units, and now you don't hit your, intervals for income as in timely a manner. So it depends, right?
Yeah. And sometimes, the early creeps can drop you 2 3 cost units. I would personally sell them just because it's important to hit the 2 star units at the 1 cost over just playing a 1 star unit of the 3 cost, just because the stats on that 2 star are a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say it definitely depends. Like, what exactly 3 cost units am I hitting? Do
Yeah,
I?
well, I'm speaking specifically about like a Scion or like an early Nautilus. I feel
Oh, I,
like,
I keep Nautilus, but
oh, I personally would not keep it just because
um,
if I value hitting those 2 stars early on,
yeah,
because if you're also, just because keeping the 3 costs costs you a lot of gold, and that could keep you from making interval money. So that's just something that I always try to keep in mind. If I'm losing something from keeping that unit, I will basically sell it.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, again, like a difference in the way that we play, and even when you look at like top 10 players, they play things differently. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of ways to get things done. It's just you have to understand what you're affecting when you do this. Like if I keep a Nautilus, I know that I'm maybe missing out on some income to keep a Nautilus. And, if my item start doesn't look like something that wants to go oceans, then maybe
Hmm.
I don't keep the Nautilus. It depends. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then we already talked about completing a strong item after Krug in most games, which we think is generally a good idea. Like you should have at least one strong item on board after Krugs because most everyone else will. Um, and then I think we wanted to talk a little bit about you're moving into the mid game where you're starting to see some 4 cost units. Maybe you're level 6, like levels 5, 6, 7. You start to see more 3 cost units, and you're starting to see
Hmm.
the occasional 4 cost unit. Um, I think that there can be like a good power spike just by way of hitting some of these 1 cost, or I'm sorry, 1 star 4 cost units early on, especially at level 5. Like if you see one in your shop, that could be a unit that you want to put on your board immediately sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to take a second to talk about like what are some of the 3 costs that, regardless, because let me back up just a second. At this point, your comp is starting to come together, right? You're like level 5,
Hmm.
level 6. You're starting to have some idea of what you want your comp to be and what direction you want to go in based on the units you found, the items you have, and your specific preferences, right? Um, but what are some units that are just like generically good that kind of, no matter what comp you're about to run, you might consider putting in at this point if you're seeing them in your shop?
Right. So I always try to pick up Kiana just because I think she's a really good unit. She has a lot of good synergy tags depending on the map, and she gets that backline access with the stun that she has. And also, just because her AI programming for the target that she hits is really good for some reason. So definitely, I try to pick up Kiana's because of that, and she can be played into a variety of maps. If you're on this patch specifically, if you're on an Inferno map, you can hit 6 Inferno with that Kiana, or if you're on the mountain map, you would play her over Talia, for example. to get that mountain buff if
Yeah,
you already have
or
a Malphite.
yeah, if you already have a Malphite, or if you hit Kiana early, she's great with early Talia for early mountain
Yeah,
buff, right?
yeah.
And I played her. We saw in my game. I played her for Oceans. Um, you don't see her played. I don't think as often for Cloud necessarily, but
Uh,
she does work for Cloud in some comps.
Yeah, definitely if you're playing that cloud map and you're noticing a lot of like berserkers or assassins, like rangers, the buff that she gives for cloud, you can play her with Janna and another mystic, and that'll give you mystic and cloud, so that's really
Right,
good.
definitely.
And just to explain, the cloud gives you dodge, so against autos, your units might survive longer just because they're dodging the attacks.
Yeah, I know when Sivir and Friends, which was like a very auto attack heavy comp, it utilized Sivir, it utilized Azir, and often Azir with the Blade Master buff. So there were like a lot of auto attacks coming out in that comp. I know when that was really popular, like a patch ago, I was seeing some like high level challenger streams where people were playing specifically like a lot more Cloud in those
Yeah, and if
lobbies,
you hit that cloud lux, you get four cloud,
which is yeah.
and that's just really good for dodging all those autos.
Yeah. So yeah, Kiana is good. I like Kindred a lot.
Hmm.
Even if you can get her, especially if you can get her with Varus, then you're like 2/3 of the way to Inferno, and you're on to Ranger. But even by herself, she can be like a nice mid-game strong unit that you can play for a little while. She can hold
Yeah,
items for things like Lux, or she can even hold like not as optimally, but like brand or singed items where she can hold some of those like AP items like Death Cap, and she can hold. She's really good with Seraph, or she could even hold like a Shogun or something in the short term to help her get more ults off. Um, right now, Shadow is really popular, so she's being played even into the end game, but she does have that ability to hold items as like a mid game transition unit, and I think Azir's still really strong, and can just be worth picking up in terms of like what are good 3 costs. Uh, and then when I look at 4 costs, things that I try to pick up usually, I don't think I've ever passed an Annie. Like I think Annie, you just get one Annie one in there. Like sometimes I like to
yeah.
level up at 2-5 right after the 2-4 carousel if I can. Um, like actually in the carousel, so I'll level twice there if I'm not like if I'm at 28 gold or something or 29 gold and I'm not going to get to 30. In the hopes that I'll hit like an Annie one when my shop comes up because that's just so big right there. Tibbers is huge. But Yorick got a little bit of a nerf recently, but he still feels okay to me. I don't know if he's as much of a priority as I would have said he is
Um,
in the past.
well, for this current patch, I would say that lights are really good, and if you are able to get like a defensive item on him, so ideally a GA, he's still really good.
Yeah.
At 1 star, I would not say that he's super great,
No.
but definitely if you're seeing like, okay, maybe I'll play lights. I got an early Senna, she's got GA and Morello's, and I just hit Yorick too. I would totally just sell that Senna and slap those items on him just because he can make better use of it with all of the light buffs and the Yorick ghouls.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Are there any other like 4 cost units aside from Annie that are really good at 1 star? Am I missing anything? Or is it just really
Um,
Annie?
if you end up playing that Azir and you're going for like some sort of
Hmm.
some sin comp, you can pick up Kha'Zix because it'll give you that desert buff. I would say that it's difficult to say that playing a 1 star 4 cost could be good just because they are a lot weaker than their 2 star versions, and they also take the if you wanted to talk a bit more about the mana they get from autoing.
Right, yeah. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but you get more mana. I know you get 10 mana, I believe, per auto at 2 star, and I think you get
Hmm.
something like 6 or 8 at 1 star. Um, that combined with the fact that they have less HP, which means they're going to die faster, so they're going to get less auto attacks off before they die, and they're going to get less mana from uh, being attacked before they
Hmm.
die, right? So things like Malphite, which Malphite has a big game impacting ultimate, right? His ability to knock up a
Yeah.
large clump of people. But Malphite 1 can struggle to get his ultimate off without items.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily always play like Malphite 1 um, just as a standalone unit. I played it in that game we just watched for a little while. Actually, for quite a while. I think I played it for the end of the game, but primarily because I was already playing Wardens. And at the point that I got that Malphite, he felt like an upgrade over Ornn or something, probably. Or at
Yeah.
least, like, if he did get his ability off, he would be more impactful. But he probably didn't get his ability off a whole lot. I would have really
I
wanted
would
to two-star
definitely
him.
still play him. Like, I think he is a good four cost,
Mm-hmm.
but you just have to keep that in mind when you are playing someone like Brand 1 or Yorick 1. They're a lot weaker than their two-star versions, obviously. And maybe it's just better to play that two-star Varus, for example, over the Brand.
Right, potentially, yeah. And then to move into like the late game, often in the late game, you kind of know what you want, right?
Hmm.
You're just rounding out your composition. So you're looking for like an extra mystic, or you're looking for your sixth inferno, or a specific unit to fill out your comp. Like you're trying to two-star brand to move your carry items onto him, or whatever it is. But in those games where your comp just like doesn't really come together, but you've still made it to level 8, what are you looking for when you're rolling down there to go like, these are just units that I can put in my comp that are good units that can help me try to get into the top 4 here, even though my overall concept for a comp just is kind of busted right now.
Yeah, so I would definitely try to get those pairs of the four costs. So, like Malphite, for example, if you get him to two-star, he's going to be doing a lot more and he's a really good front line. And if you see like an Amumu, for example, I would always pick that up just because he's an Inferno. And if I'm already playing some sort of like AP damage, I'm assuming that I'll be playing Inferno regardless. And he's just a really good way of like scaling up your current team as you're going down. Of course, you'll also hit like Nami or Terex. Definitely do like a cost benefit analysis of what you're taking out when you put these one stars in, of course. It's just they are five stars, but they are also, um, sorry, they're five costs, but they are also like one star.
Right. And sometimes they won't. That is a very difficult evaluation to make. I think like if you're taking out a Nasus 2 to play a Mumu, that's probably better than, taking out like a Thresh 2 or something. Like you're probably getting more value out of a Thresh. I mean, you are getting more value out of Thresh 2 by a pretty long shot than a Nasus 2, right? In terms of overall HP, and that sort of thing when it comes to just being a frontline tank. Um,
Yeah,
so
and also just
yeah,
thinking of like the synergies that you would be getting. So I
exactly.
know in the earlier for this set, when a lot of people were playing Ocean Mages, a lot of the times they would take out that Thresh to put in Nami because she gives you that Mystic and Ocean buff, and she's a really
Right.
good unit. So that's like if, for example, if you haven't even hit Thresh 2 and you see a Nami, some people will just opt to put in the Nami instead. But like you also have to think, okay, but then I'm getting rid of Wardens. Is that maybe worse for my team?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to consider, and it's a lot of like it depends sort of moments. But
Yeah.
in general, I think we saw me play Singed. I like Singed a lot. I think he can be, if you've got open space, you don't have to take anything out if you find a Singed one. I'll play him in transition a lot, like just while I'm continuing to roll down during, subsequent rounds and look for things. He'll just like run around and deal damage, and I think he deals a pretty good amount of damage.
Hmm.
So I think he can just be an okay inclusion in that way. Um, Lux, Lux one with items can be okay. Um,
Yeah.
it's I mean it's kind of a hit or miss thing as far as whether
Yeah.
she hits or misses her alt in a lot of cases, but she can be an option that you're seeing. Again, you don't want to take out like strong 2-star units to put in these 1 stars necessarily. Um, and ideally, like with a lot of these units, you will be looking to 2-star them as you continue to roll down. Um, you know, and these are just things that you can play that are, if you 2-star a Lux, it kind of almost doesn't matter what Lux it is. If you don't otherwise have a great comp, she's a pretty good amount of damage that you can just put in there. If you 2-star Singed and you don't have other carries in your comp, if you've got a couple of spell damage items, you can go run around and do some good damage. These kind of things for like when your comp is broken and if you didn't find the brands or you didn't find the ashes or twitches or whatever, like what can you put in at the end of the game if you're seeing them? I think these are, I guess, what are in our opinions, just general good versatile units that can kind of fill
Mhm.
those gaps, right?
Yeah, and in regards to Lux, I would say she's really good in fleshing out or like finishing your comp. So if
Right.
you're playing shadows and you hit that shadow Lux, you can play 6 shadows, and that's really strong. But I would definitely say that it's also really important that you don't just throw all your items on her because her ult does miss a lot.
Yep.
So you try to think about maybe distributing the damage that you're doing to also keep it on that Kindred or keep it on that Master Yi, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be playing for Lux every game. She's a 7 cost, and you're not going to get the synergy. You're not going to know what synergy you're going to hit when you're rolling in chops. So obviously keep that in mind and don't try to play for a Lux.
Right. I would also say that like if you hit Shadow Lux, and you don't have another good carry, like you didn't hit the brands, but you have brand items on, I don't know, Nasus or something like I kind of had in that game. Like maybe that's a transition you make, and you only have to play one more Shadow. If you can fit in, one more Shadow, you've got Shadow 3 because Lux is good
Yeah.
for 2. So then, and kind of to that point, I think if you're going to play Lux, playing a Lux that makes her own synergy, like Crystal Lux or Cloud Lux or any of the 2-cost synergy Luxes, Steel Lux, they automatically get the benefit of that synergy, right? And if it's something like
Mhm.
Cloud or Ocean, your whole team gets the benefit of that synergy. So playing those versus playing like Woodlands Lux, who requires you to play a Woodlands unit, or if you have no other Inferno units, or Inferno Lux needs another Inferno unit, I think it'd be pretty weird if you were in the end game without like one Inferno unit. Or I mean, I guess like if you're playing some of these desert heavy comps, maybe you don't have an Inferno unit, but a lot of comps have Inferno units, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know. Inferno, you could maybe get away with. There are strong Infernos that you could put in one more Inferno, but maybe it's just Woodland Lux you don't play. I don't know, but
Well, she got that woodland buff recently, but I'm
yeah,
not I'm not sure how
you got to find the other 4
applicable that
Woodlands
is.
units.
Yeah.
But speaking of those buffs, we wanted to talk a little bit from here. Unless you had anything else to say on that matter, Nikki.
No, no, no. We
Yeah,
can move on.
yeah. So we wanted to talk about from here. We were going to go ahead and talk about
Some of
the
the patch
patch
notes.
notes. Yeah, and we're going to go through the patch notes pretty quick. We don't want to spend a lot of time, I don't think, on this podcast focused on patch notes, but
Mm-hmm.
our plan is to put out a podcast every other week, which should be right after either a main patch or a B patch. So we will touch on them and kind of try to talk about like what we think they've done to the meta as a whole and what we think is important that you know. But there are a lot of already great places where you can go and read like full reviews of the full patch notes. So yeah, that being said, I think we're just going to kind of go through these somewhat quickly. Up,
Yeah, so
we're,
if you want to start off.
sure, yeah, we'll go through some more, but up on the screen right now, I have the primary thing we wanted to talk about, which were the trait changes, which we'll get to in a moment. But they broke down the patch notes into like system, items, traits, champion balance, and then there were some 3-star champion adjustments and a little bit of bug fixing, it says. The primary thing that to take away from the system patch notes is just that the RNG floor was raised in terms of uh, items, and you should, as a result of that, expect more consistent item RNG, especially in the early rounds, I think. So you're going to have less games where you get like no gold and no items in
Mm-hmm.
the early rounds. You're not going to see that as often. They also changed the amount of gold that you can get, so you're not able to get the like highest end of the gold changes anymore. Like they took out the small loot box 4 gold drop and the medium loot box 7 gold drop possibilities completely. So you're going to see like less gold start high rolls and less item start low rolls as a result of this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, they made some other changes, like there's not going to be nearly as high a chance for force of nature on the carousel, and full items aren't going to drop as much. And I think what this is going to lead to ultimately is just more consistent results from better players. Like you're gonna have less really low roll games, and your opponents are gonna have less really high roll games,
Yeah.
and you're just going to see more consistent results if you're playing in a consistent way.
Yeah, they're trying to get rid of all. They're trying to have more skill expression in the game itself by doing all these things.
Sure.
Yeah, and in terms of the items themselves, there weren't too many relevant changes. I would say everything is relatively small, and from playing the patch currently, I don't see a significant change in any of the items listed. For example, like Iceborne Gauntlet or like I know Bramble Vest is a little better, but it's not super significant. Like you can still make the item. One of the biggest things that I want to stress for the items part is just for items like Ludens and Locket, the value of it goes up depending on the unit that you put it on. So sometimes if you have a Locket and you are putting it on a 2-star Dr. Mundo versus a 1-star Volibear, definitely put it on that Dr. Mundo because your shield value will be a lot higher than just putting it on the Volibear.
Yeah. Some of the changes that they made were specifically to buff putting these items like Locket or Ludens on 3-star units, so they get a decent chunk more value if you put them on a 3-star unit now. But with the exception of like I think the Predator hyper roll is back, where people are rolling early for 3-star
Yeah,
Predators to some extent. I don't think it's a huge comp right now, but it's back a little bit.
it's
That's
definitely still good. Yeah,
yeah, and that's I think
yeah.
maybe the only comp where you're like regularly expecting to see 3-star units.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then to move on to traits, the so assassins were buffed, and that's what we're looking at here. So they're gonna get 300. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know where I made that number up from. They're gonna get increased critical strike damage, both at 3 and 6 units. So from 50 to 65% at 3 units, and 150 to 225% at 6 units. And Blade Masters were nerfed, and that's kind of a complicated nerf where um, they're just getting less overall auto attacks now because they can't store up as many auto attacks, which is something they were doing previously, which is a little bit confusing. They also have a lower percent chance to get those extra auto attacks. Desert got nerfed at 2 units, buffed at 4 units, and that's kind of in line with something that they're doing a lot of here, which is um, more specific to the 6 unit synergies, but like Inferno 6 unit synergy got buffed. 6 mages got a pretty big buff. They're getting plus 20 AP to all mages, which is similar to the Berserker buff from a couple of patches ago where they got attack damage. 6 Shadow gets a little bit of a buff up to 175%, as well as like some bonus duration. 6 Warden is buffed, and 6 Woodland clones all of your units now, which would be cool if it were reasonably attainable and Woodland units were good. Um,
There was one guy in my game who got 6 Woodlands and with a Woodland Lux, and it. I would not say you go for that comp every game, but he was doing well, I guess.
yeah,
He
yeah,
was doing okay.
okay.
I think he got third.
Yes,
So
I have also seen a couple of
yeah,
people get really lucky and hit that Woodland Lux and then do okay.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
it's a lot of effort for to be able to do okay. And then, do you want to just talk a little bit, Nikki, about we think I don't think any of the rest of the changes in the patch notes necessarily have a big impact on the meta and what comps people are playing. Um,
Yeah, and I mean the
but this
rest of
kind
it
of
is just
does.
yeah. There's just a slight Olaf nerf, for example. His attack speed has gone down by a 0.05. It's not super noticeable, but because of the current patch itself, Rangers are really popular, and Berserkers play pretty poorly into that I guess comp. So we're seeing a little less domination by the berserkers themselves. And also Ezreal got a buff, but it's really not that noticeable. If you see the current meta as of now, Ezreal isn't even in it. He got a buff, but he's a 3 cost, but you would rather just have Kindred because she's better. And he misses his ult a lot at the beginning of the round. So I just think he's not super good. Not super worth your money, I would say.
Yeah. So do you just kind of want to talk about like what has happened to the meta since the last patch, at least in these
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the
Of course.
last 5 days or
So
whatever?
so after playing for these 5 days, I would say that because of all the six unit synergy buffs, there's been a lot of that. So a lot of that dominating the games that I've been playing, as well as other high elo games that I've been seeing. So Shadow Inferno is really strong, and that just includes like a Kindred carry. She got a hot fix where the Jeweled Gauntlet proc. Now it'll actually work when she's using the item.
Right.
And that's really good for her just because she uses that item really well. And when you're playing Shadows and with Infernos, Infernos are really good early game. And because Shadows can carry you during the early game to the mid game, you can eventually scale that up in the late game to maybe include 6 Shadow or 6 Inferno because that does a lot of damage. And then the next comp that I want to mention is Poison Rangers. So this one's a little harder to play, but it uses a lot of the like crit items really well. So for example, if you have IE plus Last Whisperer, those 2 items are really good on Twitch. And you can play Rangers up until that point and eventually transition to a Singe with Morellos. And that'll just poison all the other teams. So I would say that when you have that 4 Ranger comp with poison and maybe like a warden with the crystal. Sorry, I'm going through a lot of like different things in my head. I don't know if if I should be breaking it down more.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're okay to just like there are going to be comp guides on this. Karam,
Yeah,
he put out a good comp guide just a couple days ago. I've seen a
he's
handful
the
of others.
current rank 3 player.
Is he ranked
Yeah,
3 right now? Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
he's a good catch. He's a high ranked challenger player. He's got good guides. I just kind of wanted to touch on, and I think we wanted to touch on just the kind of like what's not in the meta and what is in the meta now as a
yeah,
result
yeah.
of these changes, which were you're going over like the 6 unit stuff. One of the good things I think about Shadow Inferno is that it's so flexible, right? Because
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
can start out the game with like Kindred and Varus, and then hit another Inferno unit, eventually hit a couple Shadow units, and then you kind of have that flexibility into end game whether you're going Shadows or Inferno based on what you're seeing, right?
Yeah,
In more cases than not, it'd be Inferno, right? Just because it's easier to hit 6 Inferno than it is to hit 6 Shadow. Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, without a Lux or a Master Yi, you're not going to be able to hit 6 Shadow. Um,
yeah,
but uh, but yeah, there's that flexibility in the early and mid game, and even in the late game a little bit there. You were talking about Poison Rangers, which, like you said, that's like Twitch and Singed,
Ash,
Ash. You want to play
Turk.
Tarek, yeah,
Yeah,
the kind of big pieces of that. Um, was there anything else that you're seeing a lot of?
yeah. I've been seeing a lot of lights, so they're super strong again. I would say just because like you can carry with a vein, and then just that light buff is super good for them. It's been super popular in a lot of my lobbies, for example. I know they didn't get like a direct buff or anything, but they're definitely super strong. And honestly, I would say that the meta is in a pretty good spot comparatively to the last patch because last patch it was just Sivir and friends basically.
Sure.
If you're not playing Sivir and friends, you're not doing well or as well as you could be. But with a lot of this flexibility in the 6 unit synergies, you can be playing Inferno early and you can transition into maybe Ocean Mage or Some Sin or 6 Inferno, that kind of thing. And
Right.
then if you have like early Rangers and you're not getting any of those twitches and you're seeing a lot of Yoriks or like light units, maybe you just want to switch to like light altogether, that kind of thing. So I would just say that the meta is really flexible right now and a lot of it is just sort of playing to your strengths and what you're seeing in your shops and the items that you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, if you play to what you're getting, you're going to end up in a decent position in most games, I would say. In this, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, berserkers aren't that strong into rangers, and rangers are strong right now. But I mean, if you
Yeah.
hit good berserkers, you can still end up in, you can still top 4 your lobby right now, if nobody, if you don't have like 5 high roll players in your lobby or something. You can play a lot of stuff right now. It feels really good to me as well. um and then we just wanted to take a moment, I think, unless you had more to say about that.
No, not really. Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of, we wanted to do each week just like a quick top 8. Maybe some weeks it'll be a little more involved. This week we just wanted to talk about our top 8 TFT champions.
Yes.
Um, and they could be in our top 8 for how good they are in the game. They could be in our top 8 for how much we like them personally, or any real reason. So if you just want to start with your 8th and tell us kind of why you like that champion.
Yeah, so my eighth is Nocturne. I know people really hated the whole Blender. If you don't know, Blender is basically Blade Master Nocturne, and he was really good because there was, I don't know if it's a bug, but when they were programming or writing his code for him, he would get like an extra spin. So he would be spinning so fast that it looked like he was a blender, like the knife in the blender. And I just named him as 8 because I felt like it was a really creative way of using the unit. I just, a lot of the game like comps that I see, a lot of the times I'm really just amazed by the types of like creative like strategies people are able to come up with, like utilizing his ult and thinking like, okay, like if he has the BM spat, it's really good into him and he can use like that IE really well. So that's just what like the reason why I put him as like my 8th unit
Yeah.
or pick. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna call an audible on the show notes here because I forgot about a unit. I'm gonna make my 8th. I had Diana down. Diana's pretty
Uh-huh.
cool. She's just a good. You can carry items on her early. She's pretty strong. Gets a
Yeah.
shield that does.
Just flexible.
She
Yeah.
gets a shield that does damage. That seems pretty good to me. Um, I'm gonna go with Janna. Janna was my like first, back in the way back days of League of Legends, like the first champion I really played there. And also, as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I saw her in this set, she gets Cloud. Janna's a Cloud Mystic. Those are her tags. So she gets Cloud synergy and she gets Mystic synergy, which are both 2-piece synergy. So you only need one other unit of each to complete them. And I felt like she was instantly the best unit in the game. She Cloud synergy is your, team wide buff against auto attacks. It gives you dodge. Mystic synergy gives you incoming magic damage reduction for your whole team. How could she not be the best unit in the game?
I don't know.
Eighth on my list.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think she's good. I just think I always see her in my shop, so I'm assuming that she's not super popular. So,
She's popular with me still.
yeah,
I
yeah.
take that extra second to appreciate her as I roll past her in a lot of cases.
So my 7th pick is Lux, and I just picked Lux because I think that for Riot to add Lux and her tag, basically her tag gives her avatar and she counts as double of a trait. And I just think that's really unique because you can play a lot of cool synergies at the late stages of the game. And I feel like it really challenges you to think about, okay, maybe I can throw this in. Like, for example, if you hit Steel Lux while you're playing like a Nocturne, that's 4 steals.
Right. Yeah.
Or sorry, three
3
steals.
steal.
Sorry.
You were
Yeah.
probably playing Rek'Sai already anyway, so 3
Yeah.
steal.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, Lux is for sure a really cool unit. My 7th I have is Nico. Um, I just think Nico I is a cool unit, and I wish she had different tags.
Yeah.
Because I would like to play her more, but I feel like if I'm playing her, I've got to be playing Woodlands. But I love her alt, just, and she absolutely slaps. Like, uh, I got really excited when at the beginning of, I think it was last patch 10.1, there was the buff to 3-star Nico,
Hmm.
and people were saying like, oh, playing 3-star
Loser
Woodlands is
time.
back. Yeah. And so I played her a couple of games. I actually played her in 2 games with Riot Mort. No, 1 game with Riot Mort. And I went out in like 5th, and it was like the second or third game where I played her in a row. And I
Uh-huh.
just like typed in chat. I was like, I don't think this comp is actually good. And then in the next game, Riot Mort, who is the lead designer on TFT, I believe is
Uh-huh.
his title, or head designer or some sort of, he's a very important guy,
Yes.
with a good stream. In the very next game, Mort played that comp and then went out. He was like first place all game because he got some 3-star Woodlands early, and then he went out in like 5th or 6th, and I was just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a bad comp. I didn't play it anymore, but I really wanted to. I just like her ult hits so many units when if
Yeah.
it hits a clump, and she carries Morello's well. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I definitely think she's a good like early game unit, but
Yeah,
she can't carry, you
no,
know?
she falls off.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for my sixth, I put down Azir. And I know a lot of my picks are just because I think they are in good comps. I picked him because I think when he got that buff last patch, I believe, it was really noticeable. And I like that his sand soldiers will like spawn behind and like stab people. So
Yeah. You can just absolutely random out the other team's carrier with backline sand
which is
soldiers.
kind of annoying in like one
Yeah.
sense, but I also thought it was kind of
It's
cool. Yeah.
sweet when your Azir does it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, Azir is good. My sixth is Kindred. I just like Kindred. She does good stuff. She gets cartwheel around and one shot stuff. I just think she's a good unit. I'll play her a lot of times if I can find her.
Yeah, and my fifth is Kindred, so
Yeah. Similar reasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the way that she like can hop around, maybe not super ideally. In some games, she'll be smurfing everywhere. She'll just be jumping out of Lux ults or that kind of thing, and then in some games she'll jump right into the Lux ult. So
Yeah,
you never know.
that's the most exciting part of combat though, is like her, and then my fifth pick is Kiana. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like Kiana will be in the back line, it'll be late, and they'll have a Lux. And you were talking about how good Kiana's AI is where
Yeah.
she'll dodge to the side so that she'll set up an ult that hits 2 units. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll just be like, you'll just be like, okay, we're either gonna get hit by this Lux ult, or we're gonna juke it with an appropriately timed Kiana ult. And I mean, that's all the more exciting combat gets, in my opinion, is like watching Lux try to hit a Kindred or a Kiana or somebody with like a little bit of mobility. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty fun. So
Yeah, and Kiana's like second on my list, but we'll get to her.
yeah.
And my fourth is Nami, just because I know she got pretty heavily nerfed, but I thought that using her wave as a really and like she has good tags, so I think that's why I picked her as well. But I just think that the value of like the width of her wave
Yeah.
is so
It's
big
big.
that she just knocks everyone up, and then if she has a Morello's on her, it burns everyone. I mean, she's super strong.
So, so here's a question. This is a little bit off topic, but
Yeah.
I someone somewhere has played Morellonomicon Soraka, right? Does it apply Morellonomicon? It does damage, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that's like a pretty big area of effect. I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, why do you never see? I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
but like it doesn't
By the
do.
time you can get Nami, you can also just get like a brand almost or
Yeah, and like
something.
also doesn't her ult only hush? It doesn't like do extra damage.
I don't I don't
I
actually
don't
know. I got to be
I don't
honest
think
with
I
you.
don't think it does damage on top of the hush. That's why I don't think it's very good.
All right, well, let's go on. My fourth is Singed, which will be a shock to a lot of people that he's not my first. But and when I say a lot of people, I mean like one person who watches this. Man, I don't know. We'll see, but definitely not an actual large amount of people. But I think he's hilarious. I think it's great that he has no auto attack. He just runs around. Um, I think you I think it's great that there's some sort of bug where things have trouble targeting him and walk
Yeah.
into range to get hit by poison. I think it's great. I think it's extra great with berserkers because when berserkers leap, they can't be targeted either. So just like the whole back line comes forward, they can't hit anything. Your opponent's super mad. I'm super mad when it happens to my team, and I'm like, when are they going to fix this? But it's great. It's hilarious. It's the whole don't chase singed thing is
Yeah.
super fun.
And sorry, going back to the Soraka thing,
You look
I
it up. I was
don't
going to
play
look it
her
up.
enough. Yeah, I looked it up, and it does do damage. And uh, I'm seeing on this website that people put Morello's on her. So yeah, it probably
Somebody does
works.
it.
But
I'm doing
I
it from
mean,
now
I
on.
wouldn't put it on her because I would just put it on my carry.
Yeah, it's
So
probably bad.
yeah,
But I was just thinking about that today. I was like, that's kind of like a big area of effect. Like that'll hit a
yeah.
couple units. I don't know. Okay, your
And
number three.
then
Yeah,
my third is Malphite, just because I really like his AOE, like the knockup. Like it's also really exciting to watch him like run into everyone and just like pong.
yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
He's my number two.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I played against him in a game the other day where
Mhm.
I absolutely would have gotten wrecked had he not just like alted off to the side some Malzahar minions. He was just like, I got these three
Yeah.
Malzahar minions on lock, and I was like, sick.
It is random, but when it is good, it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, for the
Yeah.
most part, he's hitting a couple of units with most of his
Yeah.
alts, but it's funny when he misses. Yeah. My number
Yeah.
three is a Moo. My top, I mean, so Singed, not Singed as much, but like a Moo and Malphite are both units that I played a lot of in League of
Mhm.
Legends. Um, Sad Mummy, one of my all-time favorites. I wish he was crying, if we're being honest. Like the big flame thing, ultimate, whatever. He needed like the tears and just like
To
the
like fly out.
leech health from everyone around him for the whole thing. Like that would have been where it was at for me. But I still really like the fact that Amumu is even just there.
Right. Right. And then my second one is Kiana. We've already talked about her. I just think she's really good in terms of like targeting
She's
and
very good.
synergies.
Yeah, I literally like sometimes when I look at my match history and I'm not doing well and I don't see Kiana, I'm like, I think I should just be playing more Kiana. Like, because I look at my match history sometimes and I'm like, there's a lot of Kianas here and I'm doing well. And,
Yeah.
I think
And
she's
she's
just
really if you put out Shojins on her,
mm-hmm,
she does so much.
so much work. Yeah, yeah,
So much work.
yeah. I'll skip Malphite. He was my number two. He's funny, does good stuff. I'll go straight to number one, Dr. Mundo. Uh, I like one he's my maybe most played. I don't know, Cho'Gath. I might have played more Cho'Gath than him, but I got the corporate Dr. Mundo skin for those of you who
Mhm.
play League of Legends, going around throwing 80s style cell phones at people. Uh, Hope they get him into a set with that skin. I want some. I don't know if there's enough
Who
corporate.
knows? Well, aren't they doing the project stuff?
Yeah, it's like a space
Yeah.
theme next time.
Yeah.
But the 80s, like we thought a lot about the space in the 80s. They should think a lot about getting Dr. Mundo into that set.
Mhm.
Um, I get really excited though. I love that he has HP based scaling on his ultimate. Every time I see a mountain hex, I'm just like, all right, we got to play Dr. Mundo now. And I never do. I don't really play him that much. But
Yeah, I don't
I,
play him either.
the
So
fact
it's
that you can
like
like scale his ultimate off him getting 30 health every round is so
mhm.
exciting to me, even if it's not that good. Ultimately,
So my first, I guess, my favorite champion or unit is Era, just because I haven't played a lot of League, but when I did play in like season 2 or 3, that's what I played. So then when I saw that she was going to be in TFT, I was like, oh shit, like oh my god, like and then when I saw that she was so good with that Morello spread and you could like 3-star her and she could be your carry, I just I don't know, it just seeing all those plants spawn everywhere just makes me feel like really happy. So I'm sad where she is at now. So
she's okay now. I don't know. I
I
still
mean,
play her if I get her.
but like those were her golden days,
Yeah, those are
Like
behind her.
she's like a washed up like plant, like you can't really play her as like a brand like alternative. Yeah.
Word. And then we never decided. Did you want me to do this outro, or did you want to do
Yeah, go
it?
ahead for sure.
Great. So we're gonna wrap everything up here. Thank you all so much for watching. Um, we've got a Discord, so we're gonna have that coming up in the future. We'll get a link to that soon. Um, Feel free to drop in there, say hi, leave us suggestions, tell me how beautiful I am, whatever. Um, but primarily, what we want to do is just give a big thanks to Roll Music. Roll Music provided that clip of a song we used at the beginning there, their song, The Pirate and the Dancer. Thank you so much to them for that. We're also at twitch.tv, Top 8 Podcast, if you're not watching us there. We're at Top 8 Podcast on Twitter. And then we're both Top 8 Podcast on YouTube and SoundCloud. Hopefully soon we'll be on like iTunes or other podcast platforms. So yeah, just thank you again to anyone and everyone who is tuning in for this, whether you're watching us on YouTube, Twitch, or listening to us on SoundCloud. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here, Nikki?
Yeah, and like this is our first episode. We're just trying to get a foot down on what we want to do in the future, but we really appreciate anyone who has suggestions or leaves a comment, that kind of thing. We just want to put out more content as well as TFT grows. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think I'll just reiterate something that we kind of said a little bit at the beginning is like there's a fair amount of TFT content out there already. Yeah. Good TFT content out there already. This is something we're doing because we like the game, we like the genre, we like talking and thinking about it. We're both okay at the game, I think we're pretty good. So hopefully we have some good insight. But a lot of what we're doing is we just want to start these conversations and have these conversations. Hopefully we're learning as we're having the conversations, and hopefully like you can learn along with us. And definitely part of that's going to be like, hopping in Discord or leaving a YouTube comment or however you want to. Give us a suggestion if there's something you want to hear on the show, if there's something you think we could be doing better, if there's something, if you think I should wear a hat, anything,
Yeah, and like if you disagree with some of the things that we say, we'd love to hear it as well, Like we're not the know-all experts. I just gather a lot of my information from like watching streams or playing myself. So a lot of that could be wrong. And while we're learning and you're learning, hopefully we're sort of helping the TFT community in a way by shaping it into like learning the game in a different sense.
Yeah, I mean that's all kind of the idea is here is like we want to have conversations around these things rather than outright tell you like always do this or always do this or that's great or that's bad. Like let's have these conversations and talk about like the real game application of a lot of these things. So
yeah,
awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Great.
All right, well thank you again everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.